Well, man has always been a rebellious animal, hasn't he? Right? So, coming to think of it, who in the animal kingdom would have thought, look at that, that's a beehive, let's acquire the honey within it, right? Well, so are some of our entrepreneurs today, in fact. So, coming to think of it, as they have made amends and stuck by the ways of acquiring and achieving, here we have today Mr. Renato Araujo, Till Orman, Guy Horowitz on the Global Melange, moderated by Ms. Aditi Gupta. So please welcome them on stage, guys.
Funny. Oh my god. Yeah. So funny. I didn't realize it.
I'm sorry for the delay. Just take 2 minutes.
No worries. We need to sit, we need to stand.
This is your
Okay. Perfect. We'll proceed, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So,
In the middle. Yeah.
switch, so it's easier.
Yes, go ahead.
Super. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm hoping this fills up as we go along because I'm sure there's a lot of interesting nuggets that's coming your way. You've heard from a lot of Indian founders and investors between yesterday and this morning. So the idea of the panel today is to give you some global perspective now. We have a very interesting mix of founders, investors, different geographies. So that's what the discussion today will be about. We'll do about 20 minutes of discussion with the panelists here and then open it up to Q&A. Okay. So let me start by requesting my panelists to do a quick round of introduction. Okay, starting with you, Renato.
So, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, my name is Renato. I'm from Brazil. I work in the fintech space. I work all my whole life in the financial area, and right now we have a fintech company operating in Brazil and other geographies, including here in India since 2 years ago.
Thank you. Thanks again also for inviting me to Mumbai. It's my first time here, so I'm already in love with India and Mumbai. It's crazy. My name is Till Orman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Pirate Global, and I think this is one of the most important things that we do is Pirate Summit. And last year we acquired Startup Safari, that is a decentralized conference running in, I think right now, 15 countries and scaling up to 25, 30 countries this year.
Well, I'm going to embrace the fact that you guys have been the most courteous of audiences yesterday and today. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
That's brilliant. It never happens anywhere else, so I really appreciate that. I'm Guy. I'm from Israel. My day job, I'm a venture capitalist. I'm a partner at a fund called Deutsche Telekom Capital Partners. The name might ring a bell, so Deutsche Telekom is a large multinational telecom operator and managed services provider. And as such, there's a lot of business I can talk about, but we're the venture fund funded by Deutsche Telekom, so we have around 500 million euros of dry powder to invest into startups globally. I'm, as I said, based out of Israel. We have an office in Germany, as the name might suggest, and we do have a large presence in Silicon Valley.
So, Renato, let me start with you. You've been running this business in Brazil for 16 years, and you've also been coming to India for about 3 odd years. Ever since the BRIC acronym was coined about 15 years back, we in India have been told that the Brazilian and Indian economies are very similar. There's a sisterhood of sorts. So tell us, what are your thoughts on that? How do you think the Brazilian ecosystem compares with the Indian one?
Well, yes, as I said, I worked my whole life in the financial sector in Brazil, and in this sense, do understand that there are some similarities in financial inclusion when you compare Brazil and India. And of course, there are also great potential for investment and for new business in this area. At that time, I started my company maybe in the wrong way. We heard here right now that good companies, they start not only with one founder, and I did. That's the first wrong choice. Second, always is a good idea to go for investors. I didn't. So second, wrong way to do it. The good part is that it's still possible to do it in the wrong way. As far as you are really willing to get success, what can I understand from opportunities in Brazil and from India? It's first, work hard, and hopefully you got it. Right now, I would compare Indian and mainly in the financial sector. I would like to speak a little bit more about financial sector, which is my area. But it would be possible to make some sort of comparison in other areas. The financial sector in Brazil is quite similar in some sense to the Indian market. And of course, it's also changing. That's a good part. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it was different in Brazil, and I also understand that it was different here in India. Right now, we have huge opportunities in both markets. The hard part is how to find those opportunities. Yeah, but there are new good news. Government have been open new doors. The market have been open new doors in both markets. There's a very old economist in Brazil that he used to say that, and I think this is very important, but this is changing. He used to say that, and I also think that is true in Brazil and other geographies. The good that the government can do for you is always limited, but the evil is unlimited. So it's hard to find the right way in some geographies. If you are starting, at that time it was even harder. And right now I think it's much easier. What we have found so far here, not only in India, but we have starting operations in 4 other geographies. And I would compare the environment right now much easier than at that time. Again, it's necessary to find the right opportunity, the right combination of investment and product and the strategy to start in new markets. The first advice is start with very focus on simple product if it's possible. The good ideas are the obvious one usually. It's hard to see it, but if you see all the huge companies that right now are entering in other economies and other sectors, they started with a very simple idea. Not necessarily with simple implementation, but a simple idea, to solve a simple problem, to bet on a changing of behavior. That's also important. You must understand how people can or cannot change their behavior, their culture. Not necessarily of the entire culture, but some specific behaviors. If you can anticipate those changes, you're going to be far ahead from your competitors. If you just follow the trends, you may have success or not. I think that's the basic. I'm not pretty sure if I totally answered your question.
You did, and you actually gave us a lot more insight.
Yeah, but I've got some feelings from what I can compare Brazil. Of course, it's possible to go deep in analysis of Brazilian market and Indian market and other markets, but I think it's a second step. It would take lots of time for us to go deep. But start from this simple understanding: behaviors, opportunities. How can you have or not help from governments, from other companies, from investors, from partnerships, from what you have to offer? What can you best do in this scenario? Are you a specialist in? I went to a university which was intended to create scientists in Brazil. at that time, the idea was to stay inside the lab and to produce science. And that's what my education. Later we saw that it's not that easy. You really need help, especially from government, to produce science. Go to the market, it's much challenging, but it's much more interesting, and you have much more pleasure, in my opinion. It's up to you to have your choices.
Got it. So that's very helpful, especially what you said right at the outset, that there's no right way of starting up, there's no right way of doing this.
I am an example of that. I can share some experience. Until now, our company is self-funded. It was, in fact, opportunity for us, or in fact, it was not opportunity for us to raise funding. As far as we are a financial provider, so what we provide is a platform for many banks. And since the beginning in Brazil, 15 years ago, all of Brazilian banks started using our platform. And when we realized that it was possible for us to grow up quickly, we started talking with some of those banks in order to raise some funding. And what we heard from them was, okay, as an investor, I would like your company to be as profitable as possible. But as you are my provider, I would like you to be as less profitable as possible. So I'm really doubt if it's a good idea for us to put money on your company. They prefer the second option, to be as less profitable as possible, considering that we are provider for 100% of Brazilian financial institutions. So it's hard to find the right way, and our income comes from those banks, not from the market, from the client, from the final client. So it's really important to make sure that you have the right path to be successful. I understand that we are a perfect example that there are more than one option to do that.
Thanks so much. Guy, let me come to you now. Israel is a market that all of us globally look up to in terms of product innovation. You guys are so good at that. So tell us what you think contributes to the success of the Israeli ecosystem, and what are some of the things that other ecosystems around the world can do to learn from that, replicate that?
Sure. So first, by show of hands, how many people here have heard or met an Israeli startup? Heard of or met an Israeli startup? Okay, not too many. So consider this a 101 on Israeli startup innovation. Israel is a very small country. There are 8 million, maybe 8.5 million people in Israel now. So by comparison to any ecosystem that you might be familiar with, it's tiny. The first thing you can understand about this is that there's no local market, no large local market for startups. If you want to scale, if you want to be a huge company, odds are you cannot or will not want to focus on Israel. Which means that as an entrepreneur, the first thing you have to think about is going global. By the way, for many Israelis, going global means going to the US, going to America. There are definitely opportunities here in Asia, in India, in China, elsewhere, but most Israelis, owing to being able to speak English rather than Chinese or Hindi or any other language, would choose America. The other thing you have to know about Israel is that the country is as young as India. We were established pretty much around the same time. Israel went through 7 wars since. So military service and military upbringing is part of our culture, part of the way we think about the world. It doesn't make us militants, it's actually forcing us to think outside the box, to challenge conceptions, to keep pushing the envelope on innovation, both on the R&D side, so developing new technologies and new weapons or new approaches to cyber warfare, and on the other hand, also think about the other side. What does the enemy think? How do they operate? What will they do? So developing that kind of thinking, typically referred to as intelligence. So not the kind of intelligence you all possess here, and I did hear that this institution is famous for its intelligent students, so I think you can understand what the the intelligence is and what it contributes to the equation. But when we talk in Israel about intelligence, it's typically understanding, knowing what the other side wants to do, plans to do, or has in possession. And this is very useful also when you go to market with your products or your ideas. Because the first thing you have to ask yourself is, will the customers want this? What do they actually need? What is the best way to serve the customers? So not coming up with a solution, coming up with a problem that the customers have and try to work your way from the problem back to the solution. The last thing that we've heard in Israel, and maybe I'm going to challenge your statement. I mean, maybe in Brazil it's true that the government can do a little good and a lot of harm or evil, but in Israel, the innovation ecosystem owes a lot to the government. And don't make a mistake here, we are very critical of our government when we need to be critical of the government. And there are many reasons to be critical of any government in Europe, in South America, or in Israel. But when it comes to innovation, when it comes to financing and promoting startups and larger companies, the Israeli government, I believe, is second to none. The model that Israel has set for creating investment vehicles, for encouraging, promoting, incentivizing innovation, has been a model that's been copied across the globe with different levels of success. Some have actually copied and got better than Israel at this. Singapore is an example. I think South Korea is doing a great job. And I believe the Indian government has also shown interest in the models that were developed in Israel for supporting, financing, promoting innovation. I'll stop here. There are many other things I can add later.
Thanks so much. Did you run these, fantastic set of summits in Germany?
Mm-hmm.
And that sits at the sort of center of a lot of the action that's happening in Europe now.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are some of the cultural differences you've seen in founders from different countries within Europe, or maybe even different continents?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it's also a tough question because especially if you look, for example, at Eastern Europe, it's so fragmented and you have so many different kind of approaches and cultural differences even in that small area already. So maybe I want to start from the maybe more macro perspective and then go into the micro, like the very entrepreneur point of view. So from the macro perspective, I think there's an obvious one is the availability of funding. That is very different if you look at UK, if you look at France, maybe Germany picking up as well, and a couple of other countries, the Nordics in Europe especially. And then you look at, for example, Eastern Europe, or you look at Turkey, or even more Eastern, then the availability of funding gets very, very limited. And I think that's one of the problems. But also, if you look at it from a different point of view, it's one of the more positive challenges because some of the most driven entrepreneurs I've seen have worked with zero capital and built sustainable companies and bootstrap companies. Everyone knows what bootstrap means here? Yeah, wonderful. That's a
Because it's going to be important when you start up.
educated audience here. Very, very good. So I think funding is an obvious one. Of course, there are companies and business models where eventually you need money to scale it up globally. So it's not a point where I say funding is not necessary. I mean, Guy is one of the best examples here. So it's just, it puts you, if you have ever built a company based purely on revenue and cash flow, and you acted as a profitable company, that's addictive. It's really, really addictive. And I think this is one of the best things that can happen to you if you still own 100%, 70%, 80% of the company, and you make profit. So it's one of the very good feelings that you can have as an entrepreneur. Obviously, maybe you can only scale it up to 50 million euros, $50 million market value or company value, and you need another 10 million to scale it up to 100 million. So that's the other point of view, obviously. So it's always what kind of markets you wanna look into. One of the other things is let's focus on the second one, and then we'll keep a long story short. Is availability of talent. especially in places, I think, in Asia, in Eastern Europe and so on. You see lots of well-developed tech, especially tech and IT talent that is, for example, missing a lot in Germany, in France, in Netherlands, also in UK, and we're very desperate to find capable and kind of startup-ish, like they are interested in working for a startup, can also work with the environment of a startup because it's way different than to work for a corporate. And this is one of the big inequalities that we have. Is I think we have a good market. You can earn good money in Europe, but you need a very nice, a good product, well developed, well executed, and especially for the developed, like the product part. There's lots of talent missing that you have here in India, and it is elsewhere in Asia. You have it in Eastern Europe, and there's like the kind of bit like I might be wrong. It's just my subjective point of view. Is there's like a little bit of the execution side missing. So like the business guys that just push it forward and sell it. Yeah, especially the new digital products. Yeah. So I think this is one of the or like two of the most obvious findings if you compare ecosystems. Yeah.
Well, that's a great point, especially on the talent bit. That's something we see even entrepreneurs in India struggling with, especially when you talk of deeper tech products.
Mm-hmm.
We have institutions like IIT which produce great talent, but do we have enough for the number of businesses that are being built? And we do lose a lot of talent to overseas markets as well. So I think that's something we'll definitely come back and talk about. Going back to something you mentioned earlier, that the limited size of the Israeli market means that a lot of the businesses look to enter the US to grow their businesses. So in your experience, what are the sort of key things that a founder should look out to as they're growing beyond their home market? Because in India also we see a lot of businesses which are looking at the US as an additional territory, especially for SaaS businesses, software-driven businesses. So what would your headline advice to them be?
So it's always good to have a solution tested in a local market. And I guess if English is a spoken language here, then language is not going to be a problem when traversing the ocean, going with your product to the US, for example. But business problems do not always transpose very well to a different context, to a different location. So in many cases, solutions developed locally for a local market with a specific need might need adaptation, if not a complete change of scope or mindset in order to succeed abroad. The fortunate bit about not having a local market is that you've got to think about how the other half lives, what other countries, other markets would look like before you start developing or designing your product. When you already have something that's successful locally, adapting it might actually take longer and might require you to take very deep cuts into your initial think and initial product design, while if you'd started with that market in mind, you might have designed the product completely differently. So it's completely okay to try and take your product or idea from this market to the other, but if you're interested in conquering the US market, for example, or European markets, or other markets around Asia, it doesn't necessarily mean that something that was successful here is going to scale and succeed elsewhere. And I think if there's one lesson that I can bring from the Israeli innovation market or innovation ecosystem to here, is that the desire to try, fail, iterate, move forward is something that's embedded in the anima, in the who am I of the Israeli entrepreneur. And I think that's part of what a successful entrepreneur globally could aspire to have. So the willingness to fail, not the desire to fail, but accepting and embracing failure and failing fast, failing forward, learning and taking it to the next step is something that is super important. And in some countries, I'll mention Germany because I'm quite familiar with the German ecosystem as well. Germans are amazing R&D people, great technologists, great academics. When it comes to the desire to fail or the willingness to fail, I think that's a bit that's still lacking. I don't know what the situation is here in India. I haven't spoken to enough of you guys, but I believe that's something you've got to come to terms with. Entrepreneurship is not always about success, and actually failure forges you and fortifies you just as much, if not more, than success.
Super. You're right. I mean, that's something that as Indian founders, investors, the ecosystem is still coming to terms with, because we really like to celebrate our successes and push our failures under the carpet. So I think that mentality needs to evolve. So Renato, continuing on this thought with you, you've worked in the Brazilian market for about 15, 16 years, and then a few years back you took your product international, and you now operate in 4 other countries. So what was the experience of scaling outside the home market? What were the biggest challenges you faced?
Well, first, as I said, the first important thing is to try to anticipate change of behavior in each market. If you have a new product or a new concept in this in a whole old sector, just like financial sector is quite old, but at the same time has a space for huge amount of improvement. It's obvious that fintech sector is one of these examples, and maybe because it has to do with some obvious problem, as I said. Financial inclusion is a problem all over the world, not only in developing economies, but also in that we saw in also developed economies, just like Europe. It's amazing how we found numbers in Europe stating that there's still space for financial inclusion over there. That was our first amazing opportunity to feel that there was space for us in other markets. So we start outside Brazil, first in Mexico in 2014. First conversation was in 2013, and then we really started operating in 2016. So it took us almost 2 years between the first conversation and the first client. But that was our first experience outside Brazil. And again, our company, when we started in Brazil, we were not aiming at international markets. We thought that at that time that the problem that we were solving was a problem mainly for Brazil. We are totally wrong in this sense. Later we saw that the problem that we are solving in Brazil, which has pretty much to do with financial inclusion, mainly with financial inclusion, is a problem that you can get all over the world space to work on it. And the first, in this sense, the first country we got outside Brazil was Mexico, which also has some similarities with our economy, especially if you are talking about financial inclusion again. And then I came to India in 2015, and it was absolutely amazing to see that yes, there's huge potential for improvement in financial inclusion here. Even with the demonetization that was held in 2016, we saw that there is even more space for that here. Because again, the government is trying to help. Some people say that they are not so helpful in this sense. But again, where is a problem, there's also always opportunity. After India, we started operating different geography. That was on purpose. We started in UK, and we also found opportunity for financial inclusion in UK in this sense. I'm not talking about our platform itself, but I think this is the least important part. The more important is about concept, about needs, about problems, as I said, about obvious problems. And in our case, our obvious problems is financial inclusion, mainly. And we found it in UK, we found it in Italy, where we are also operating right now, in Portugal. And also here in India, we found that there is a huge opportunity for that. The problem is the strategy that you follow to do it. as I said, as a self-funded company, we have limited resource, and we can take limited risks. It's much easier to take risks when you have to fail, when you have someone else money. It's really much easier in my point of view. When you are using your own money, you just stay a little bit behind, which I don't think that's necessarily bad. Depends on how you can handle these opportunities. Spend money, take risks, do it quickly, take a risk of someone else copying your idea. And in this sense, right now, we are evaluating the opportunity of investment, yes, because we do understand that we are starting in 3 or 4 other markets outside India and Brazil and Mexico, but we do understand that there is space for, in this sense, if you really want to go global, there is space in other geographies. But you need to find the right strategy. Usually the best strategy is just find 1 or 2 geographies to start operating. As we heard right now, usually one of them is the United States. Depending on what you are doing, and it's a good idea. Depending on what you are doing, it's not necessarily the first choice. For us, until now, it's not our first choice. United States is not a place where you really need to talk about financial inclusion.
So let's go back to what Till mentioned earlier, which is attracting talent remains a big challenge for founders. So what are some of the hacks that you've seen, whether in your personal journey or founders around you, businesses you've invested in? What have you learned from those businesses, and what have they done right to attract good talent?
Should I answer, or was it for? Okay, just everyone. Okay. Yeah. Just a quick thought. I think one of the great companies I've seen that attracted great talent and still attracting great talent is they are very much evolved within the necessary industries. So that means, for example, I'm thinking of a company based off out of my hometown, Cologne. They're doing social media analytics, and they are looking for product developers at the moment, or for years. They're constantly growing, bootstrapped from 10 to now 50 or so people. And what they did is they completely emerged basically with the local scene of product developers, and they hosted their meetups themselves. Everything focused on that specific topic, on UX or specific product design topics. And if they need a developer, they hosted developer meetups. So they are like the core, the center of the scene basically, yeah, of the specific scene. And that gives you, especially for coders or for developers, or also for designers, that gives you credibility. And I think that is very necessary and very smart also, because it gives you not only the option of presenting yourself as a company, and like there are many opportunities that come out of that, but also gives you sustainable and long-term access, first person view access basically to the necessary talent, and you are at the core. So that is one of the smart hacks I've seen, witnessed, yeah. And there are many more, I guess, but it's always putting yourself at the core, adding value for that scene, and then like give. At some point you can also ask, yeah.
Sure. I think one of the most important traits of a successful business venture is diversity. Diversity of opinion, diversity of backgrounds, diversity of capabilities. So the one thing that's very unique about the Israeli market, for example, and I think might apply here as well, is that Israel is a country of immigrants. People have moved from different countries to Israel over the past 70 years, but it's been in waves. So it's not just 70 years ago and then third generation are all the same. We have immigrants coming from former Soviet Union or Russia and the republics now, people coming from Africa, people coming from America and Europe. So this makes Israel very unique. You have people from different backgrounds coming together and working together as teams. So for the ones of you who are going to start a company, I would really recommend to seek to actually proactively try to have a diverse background and diverse ecosystem in your own company. So women and men, older people and younger people, people from different geographies, people with different backgrounds. This is very, very important for your success. Just by show of hands, how many people here are not Indian born? How many people here were born elsewhere? Okay, not too many. Whenever possible, it is important for you to look for those individuals who will bring the other, the different perspective into your venture. I think if there's one key thing that differentiates great startups from good startups is the diversity.
Yeah, I would add only one point. It's very important to have diversity, for sure, but I also understand that it's important to have flexibility. And I do understand that for Indian culture, you are very flexible. And this is really, really important. I mean, flexible in the sense of thinking on different ways to solve the same problem. This is sort of diversity, but it's also sort of flexibility. And also to stay focused on a problem, but seeing from different point of views. And what I saw so far here in India is that there's really amazing minds, and not only here in India, outside India, but people even here, they have really a different way to think about the same problem if you compare to, for instance, an European mindset. And I think this is one of your most important value or equity, let's say, that you should really remember always.
Thank you. So let's open this up to questions now. Would love to get your questions. Yes.
Hi everyone, my name is Siddharth. My question to you is, since you all have experience in fintech sector and decentralized application, so what do you think about blockchain technology? Will it fundamentally change the world, or is it overhyped, or is it the next tech wave after the internet?
I think the fintech guy is probably the best one to answer it, but my answer is yes, it will fundamentally change everything over the next years.
Yeah.
Now a more deeper.
Yeah, blockchain, yes. Bitcoin, no, for sure. They're totally different. Those digital currencies, I don't believe on them. But the blockchain itself has power to really change the way contracts are being doing since ever. In this sense, I think there's huge opportunity. Of course, there's also some elements to do with bureaucracy. You are changing, again, some behaviors, especially in this scenario. You are changing laws. It's necessary even to change some laws to have even more space for blockchain to substitute contracts, agreements, digital agreements. But it's a matter of time, in my opinion. But not necessarily with currency. Don't focus only on currency.
Just one word. The focus should be on the crypto side, not on the currency side, rather on the authentication and the security of the transactions. One of the promises of blockchain is the fact that actual transactions are broken into a chain of minuscule transactions, but these should be always secure. And the crypto side of things is definitely going to evolve, so whoever wants to have a startup in that area might consider that part of the business as the most important.
This question is open to all of you. So why since you are bootstrap, right? When did you know what time was right to add another member to your team? Like, did you have an insurance of fund, or when did you know was the right time to add another?
So, maybe you want to start?
Yeah.
So I think as soon as you will feel it as an entrepreneur when you have reached the product market fit, and you have made, for example, let's say you are like a two-founder team, and you can sustain yourself with the company, then it might be the right time to take like a small risk, hire like an intern or like I don't know, whatever money is left or might be left in the future, and you are an entrepreneur, yeah, you love risks, yeah, at some, like, to some extent. So you believe in the future earnings are coming, hopefully, and then you can invest the hopefully future earnings into like a new intern, full-time employee or so. So it's always very much depending on what is your bank account saying. That's basically how we scaled it up over the last 8 years to 30 people right now. We're still like looking each day, each 6 hours at the bank account. What does the bank account say? Is it good to grow? Is it good to keep it that way at the moment? So it's very much a cash situation. Yeah, the cash situation basically.
One piece of advice to anyone trying or wanting to add a member, and I think from a timing standpoint, it's exactly right. When it feels the burden is too much for one, or the number of people that you have in your venture, it's probably already too late. So you should always keep in mind and try to think of good people to add, even before hitting that wall or that threshold. Partnering is like marriage. Adding a person into your venture is as important a decision as getting married, and hence you should date people before you take that decision. So it might be your best friend. Should I talk about divorce?
That's all of us get, huh?
Oh yeah, I'll talk about divorce later, but yeah. For now, let's focus on the bright part. So not just selecting or picking the first person that comes to mind and getting into this with her or him. You should actually take the time, try to understand whether you see things the same way. What would happen if, God forbid, you have a problem or an issue? How will that be resolved? And only when you've made up your mind that that person is a person you'd like to share your life with, take that, kneel down and, no, just kidding.
Well, as I could understand your question, there are two options: to have a partner or to have just an employee. Yeah. Well, they are totally different approaches. You may choose both of them at the same time or in different time. For a partner, I totally agree with what he said. It's just like a marriage. It's important to have someone that also believes in your ideas, in your concerns, and it's necessary to date before to get it a partner. It's quite difficult because as a marriage, it's the same challenge. If you have the second option to hire someone, it's much more an HR problem. So it's totally different. So you can spend money with employee, let's say intern or not, and have nothing back if you don't approach the right way to get that person working for you. So it's much more HR problem. So probably people who are entrepreneurs are not seeing these HR concerns as clear as they would. But the advice I would get is see it as an HR problem. So you must have some structure to put someone in your team and get something back. Otherwise, they're going to just waste your time, and you're going to waste their time, and with nothing in a good sense to get from it.
Okay, on that excellent note, we're going to have to come to a close on this. I'm being told time's up very strictly. So thank you for being a wonderful audience. I hope this was insightful. Sure was for me. Thanks so much to our panelists. I mean, you've come from far. And thank you so much for making the time and effort to be here today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Hold on. We're going to do one more thing.
Well, in our
We're going to do the
gratitude,
selfie, so everyone please smile. Yeah, audience.
well, well, to show our gratitude, we would like to present you all with a token of appreciation, sir.
Okay.
And for that, I'd like to request the Israeli Deputy General Consulate to come up on stage and present them, please.
Yeah.
I request the audiences to please give them a round of applause.